Everybody knew everybody. You had elderly people, especially women, that you had to have respect for because if you didn't, it was like they would tell your parents what you did. And they would be, you get punished for what they saw and what you said.
Good afternoon. My name is Brother Rahman. I'm from an organization called the National Runaway Slave Freedom Foundation. And we're here today to interview an elder of ours in the community that's been in our community. I found out 91 years, 92 years now. And one of the first questions that I had started to ask him is that I thought he actually was born in a southern state. But come to find out this afternoon earlier that he actually was born right here in the Rockville Center area.
Yes.
So I would like to ask you some questions. I know you've been asked a lot of questions already by the group that's with us because we're excited to hear all the information that you have to give us in reference to how you lived, who lived here, where they lived, and actually when they came to Rockville Center. We would like probably to start with those 5 questions. So,
just give me the first one.
Well, the first question we'd like you to do is to introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Henry Dorsey. I was born in Rockville Center at 3 Randall Court, 1931, in Rockville Center.
Okay, when you came to Rockville Center, you were actually a young baby when you.
I was born in Rockville Center.
Okay, so what was the community like? What was Rockville Center like when you got here and as you grew up? Were there many people here already in this village?
There was quite a few. The black people lived in this neighborhood where a lot of Italian people lived also. They mixed. The black and the Italians mixed because they own property and they own stores here. And that's who we dealt with.
How long did the Italians actually stay here? Did they stay here for a long period of time before they moved away, or did they pass away?
Oh yes, they helped rebuild Rockville Center, some of them, on the stores. And they helped a lot of the Italians on Nassau Street, Nassau Avenue, helped black people learn how to swim down there at Mill River. The Calderons.
So it was a pretty tight community between Italians
and the
Italian and black people.
Young fella, Bruno's son, used to play with us, Frankie. We played together. But the idea is they weren't other people not too out of the Hempstead Avenue area that came down in here. The people that were automatically living here.
So where was the African or the black children going to school at that time? Were they going to the same schools as the white, but the Italians were going?
No, if they lived in Rockville Center and you lived south of Merrick Road and Sunrise Highway, you were allowed to go to Riverside School. And a lot of people went there. A lot of blacks, because there wasn't that many blacks living up in that area. But the most of the kids went to where the Catholic school is now on Clinton Avenue.
So all the African American and black children went to where St. Agnes School is?
Where St. Agnes School is now, yes.
So how many years later did Watson School come into play? Because I know when we were growing up as young people, we had to go to Watson School. That was our primary school during that time. And that's where we went until the Civil Rights Act came through, where they started to discriminate the schools, and then they started spreading this all over to other schools in the area.
I don't know the exact year, but I know that I worked with Mayor Woods when they started closing some of those schools to get down to where we are now, because they had, like I told you, it was Clinton School then. You had Hewitt School, you had Riverside School, you had Wilson School, and we had another one you had called the name of Marsh Avenue School. That's what was the name. And then you had the school in South Hempstead.
Earlier we talked about the churches in the community. You said that there were several churches in this community that we attended.
On Banks Avenue, Second Baptist Church was south of the railroad tracks. There was a Coca-Cola plant next to that. There was a restaurant. They had an ice house. Lister's Buick was across the street. The railroad tracks were down on the ground. In 1948 is when they had the train accident because they were elevating the train station. When you went to the Rockville Center train station, you had to go through underground to get from one side to the other.
Now, during that time, how many actually African American or so-called black families were there in Rockville Center?
Oh, now you got me. Because let me tell you something. There was quite a few. First of all, a lot of them had apartment houses down on Banks Avenue. Mr. Overhopper had a row of houses in what you call Willow Court. And then they had a big white house where they had families living. But you didn't have that many apartment houses for blacks to move into.
You said you didn't quite know how many families were in Rockville Center at that time?
No, you couldn't count them.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know how many.
So it was congested then. There was a lot of people in a small area.
And everybody knew everybody.
Everybody knew everybody.
Everybody knew everybody. You had elderly people, especially women, that you had to have respect for, because if you didn't, it was like they would tell your parents what you did. And they would be, you get punished for what they saw and what you said. I can name you 3 of those ladies.
Go ahead, help yourself.
Miss Gordon. Josephine, I think her name was Josephine Gordon. Mom Reddick, they used to live upstairs over Second Baptist Church, but they moved over to 85 Banks Avenue next to Shiloh. And then you had a lady named Miss Zelma Miller. You also had Miss Bessie Button and other women that were older, that was watching even kids older than me. If you were doing something wrong, they would report it to your parents.
So what kind of employment did they have? You say it was largely congested with African people. Did they work anywhere, or how did they actually survive?
Well, you had a lot of men that did concrete and construction work. You had a lot of men. My father and a couple of other men, black men, did tailor. They were pressers. They worked in a tailor shop.
So there was an unemployment available during that time for us as a people.
Oh, yes, yes. There are quite a few black men that were pressers up on Village Avenue, up on Sunrise Highway on the other side of Park Avenue. There was a tailor shop up there. My father worked there. I was hired after school to clean out you know how you have the cuffs on your pants? You have to clean out the cuffs before you really clean your pants and press them. You go to get the dust out of that. That's what my little job was. We picked up bottles and took them to the store. You got 2 cents for the bottles.
At that time?
At that time.
So the women who did stay at home, I remember my grandmother. I remember a white lady used to come to our house maybe a couple of times a week, at least once for sure, and bring clothes for her to iron. And that's what she did all day. She ironed clothes and folded them. And either that evening or late afternoon or the next morning, she would come back to the residence to pick up her clothes. A lot of women were doing that during that time to actually make extra money.
Not only that, there were women who were working in the houses of people up on Hempstead Avenue, rich people. Mm-hmm. They had people to come and do their house cleaning and cooking. And then they start hiring young girls to come and sleep in for a whole, or whatever the season was, in their house. On Thursdays, these young ladies were allowed to go shopping and come out of the house, and sometime on Sundays to go to church. But they were black, and they worked in the white area.
Now, I did some research, and some of the literature I've seen, it stated they had, I I guess you would call it butler's quarters in the back of some of the bigger houses where some of the residents from African American community, or as you said earlier, the Thursday night girls, they would actually live in these buildings.
Yeah, they had butler's quarters. Not only that, they had black men that were chauffeurs. And so they lived on the property. And they also, the sleep-in girls, they had quarters for them to sleep on. They had to sleep in the house. They gave special quarters for them. But they had chauffeurs also.
Were African Americans?
African American chauffeurs.
Yes. Were they free to move around the village of Rockville Center? I lost my train of thought on that. I was asking you if they actually were able to move around freely in the village of Rockville Center and go wherever they had to go without being bothered by anybody?
Oh, yes. But I'll give you an incident. One of the young men that I run around with, his father got hit by the train on Nassau Street behind the Beeline Bus Company. He got some money from that accident, and he moved up on Hempstead Avenue, right on the other side where the hospital is now. And James Henry told me the Ku Klux Klan came and burned the cross on that property, and he had to move back down here.
Approximately what year was that, if you can remember?
It had to be before maybe 1935 or 36, whatever it was. At that time when the tracks were down on the ground. But at that place, the bell rang and the gates came down. They didn't have a gateman at that stop. The gatemen were at North Center Avenue. They had a hut there for the men to sit in, and one on Village Avenue and one on Banks Avenue. And they had one on Park Avenue. These men would sit there all night, and they had different shifts. Other men would come in to shift. We would go to the coffee store for them to get coffee, sandwiches. They give you a quarter. You buy a hamburger and a coffee for the man, and you got the nickel. That was your money for going to the store. Wow. That was your money for going to the store.
Now, one of the things that we enjoyed a lot, I remember as a young guy, and whenever I got the opportunity, after I got maybe about 16, 17 years old, we had one of the most popular or famous streets in any community that I know of on Long Island, maybe except for Freeport, but Banks Avenue. Could you tell us a little bit about Banks Avenue and what went on down there?
Yes, I could tell you about what went on down there. Banks Avenue had a bad reputation with black people. And if you went for a job up in the village over Hempstead, don't tell them you lived on Village Avenue. This is what my mother tells me now. You could say Willoughby Street, Randall Avenue, and still be in the same neighborhood as long as you just say Banks Avenue. That was the reputation they had, because on Friday nights, the police were down there every weekend with fights. I mean fights. The police were down there. One man, I think he got in trouble with the policeman. He hit a man in the eye, Cy Queen, and put his eye out. Mr. Quincy Cotton. I don't know what the results of that was, but he had Cy Queen. I went to school with Cy Queen's son.
So it was kind of
it was rough.
Yeah,
it was rough because they would go to that bar, and when they get all liquored up, they'd be fighting one another, and the police would come and try to break it up.
Now, would it be rough for the people in our own community who actually lived here, or would it be rough for outsiders? Like
no, it was our own people that lived here. You didn't have too many outsiders coming to fight. They were right here. They were right here in this neighborhood. From, say, up from Nassau, not Nassau, what's the street where the nursing home is now? Main Street. From Main Street down to the railroad tracks, that's where black people live. From Village Avenue all the way over back to the reservoir.
And they had a bunch of homes back up in there. People lived together, and that's how they. So when did it actually change then? When?
Let me explain that to you.
Yeah.
You had people living in the same house, maybe 4 or 5 different families. but you used the same bathroom and the same kitchen. You didn't take tub in the bathroom. You didn't have no bathroom tubs. You had those metal tubs. We'll call it where you go take a bath in.
Oh, so that's how they bathed themselves.
That's how they bathed themselves.
They worked like we were kind of taught that everybody take a turn to get into the bathroom. We had to pour hot water in the tub. We didn't have running hot water. We had to boil it on the stove.
Well, not necessarily everywhere you go, because in Willow Court, they had the big burners that you could turn on and light it up to heat the water. And then you still had to pour it in tubs, because you didn't have a bathtub or a shower in your bathroom. All you had was a sink and a toilet.
And we lived in close-knit areas among
Close-knit areas among ourselves. And people hung out tubs on the outside of their windows. If you live in a crowded house, you had a tin tub, you put nails in the windowsill, hang the tubs up, and put some of your food in. Because if you went to the refrigerator to get your food, somebody else living in the house might have used it.
Now, during that time, did they actually have real refrigerators, or they had
No, they had ice boxes. The ice man came around. You would tell them what size ice you want. They would chip it off, put it in the box, and underneath the ice box, you had a pan to catch the water that dripped off from the ice and pour it out. But the ice man came around. That's how you got your ice.
And I remember the coal man used to come around the same way. I remember my uncle used to open up the side window, and they would pull in with a long chute and shoot it down in the basement.
Into people's apartments.
Yes.
And every apartment had a basement apartment where you put coal or your wood or whatever. There was 4 apartments in each step. 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs. 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs. And then in the back, they only had 1 floor. They didn't have 2 floors, but they had like 2 families.
Now, did you all have the chore back during that time of cutting, splitting wood, and bringing coal in the house, and loading the coal stoves and stuff?
Yes, you go to the coal house up on Sunrise Highway and get a wagon and bring coal to your house if you didn't have a chute to put it in. You got your wood from the vegetable stores that had the oranges and apples in the crates, and you brought that to start your fire with that kind of wood. Didn't have heavy wood, but the crates, orange crates and apple crates, boxes, that's where you start your fire.
Well, how were the winters like when that kind of season, when it got extremely cold? Because I know the temperatures back then were a lot colder than they are now. So everybody was managed to survive. They had a lot of blankets, or the houses.
A lot of homes had what they call furnaces. And when you put the coal in the furnace, they had the grates where the heat comes up.
Straight up to the floor.
Through the floor. Some people had it in their hallway so it would go through the whole house. Some might have had it in special rooms. But that's what they had. They had furnaces. You could put your wood in and go, make a fire. After that, you put your coal in, because coal lasted longer.
So now,
some people had kerosene stoves, little small kerosene stoves in their apartment beds, in their rooms.
What was it like when you started school?
You had to be of age to start school. We had the kindergarten, first grade, but you had to be, I think it was 5 or either 6 years old. And then if you weren't that age, you had to wait another year before you could go into your class.
Everybody walked to school. There was no such thing.
Oh, no, there was no buses, no buses. Everybody walked to school. You could walk from here up Hempstead Avenue, that lot where the Catholic playground is now. There was a lot there. I don't know what kind of house they had there, but they had bushes. We would cut through the lot to go up to the Clinton School. Mm-hmm. And some of the older guys would go up that way to go to the high school.
Now, how about the girls during that time as y'all were growing up? They were, what kind of girls were they?
They were nice girls, but the only thing is, girls didn't wear pants then. And it was cold weather. A lot of times, you don't know how to dress, but girls had to wear like stockings and skirts. They didn't have slacks and things for girls to wear. You couldn't even wear slacks to Mercy Hospital if you were a woman. You weren't allowed in. The Catholics didn't allow you in slacks.
So they had a dress code back that time?
They had a
for
dress
women.
code back that time.
All women or just
All women that went to Mercy Hospital, if you went to visit, you could not go in with pants on. You had to have a dress or skirt. And now the nuns wear pants. Show you how times change.
And the medical, you mentioned you had a doctor named Dr. Utz.
Dr. Utz was a medical doctor. He came in, I don't know exactly where he came from, but when he came here, he tried to get a home up on the Hempstead Avenue side, and because he was a black man, they wouldn't allow it. And he moved down on Nassau Avenue, down near the park, near the woods, and he had his office in his home. But they did have white doctors now. Listen to this. On Park Avenue, South Park Avenue, the white patients would go into another door, the black patients would go into a side door. There are two different offices for those people.
Well, I do remember when I maybe was around 5 or 6 years old, and when we got sick, one of either my uncle or my grandmother or my aunt, somebody would take us. I remember a doctor named Dr. Gray. They were on Lakeview Avenue, and it was $5 a visit then. And you would go in and they would treat you.
Well, I don't remember the names.
Yeah.
I don't remember the names.
But,
But it was, white doctors did take care of a lot of black people. But you had to go into, like I said, the separate door. They didn't allow you to go into the same door that the white people went in. They had separate
it
offices.
wasn't too much different than the South then when it comes to how they treated us in reference to what doors we could go in, what restaurants we could eat.
Well, you didn't have too much of a problem with restaurants now. You could go in and buy your food at a restaurant.
Oh,
You could
they
eat.
did allow you to.
Oh, yes,
purchase
and
food.
eat in the restaurant also.
Oh, okay.
They had the bowling alley up on Village Avenue and Sunrise Highway. Upstairs, there was a restaurant on that corner. You go in, it was like a Needix almost. That's what they call it, I think, at that time.
Okay, so now, let's see. So we covered several things here. When did we start to get to the point where we lost our old school housing like we used to live in, which was kind of like dilapidated housing, and they started to, urban renewal came through. That's what I'm trying to get at. When and how did urban renewal come to this community?
Actually, Reverend Mayor Woods was the first one to start shutting down some of the schools. That started. Now, as far as being unsegregated, I don't know exactly what year. I couldn't tell you exactly what year. But the village probably would have that on record.
Well, I recall, I think it was 1960 something when we fought for the changing of the school systems and stuff like that. And then that's when Watson School became the first school that was dedicated, only dedicated mostly to African Americans. Then some years later, it started to change over, and now it's integrated. In other words, everybody goes.
Yeah, but you don't have bus loads taking you up to Hewlett School, do you?
No.
Okay. You don't
Yes,
have.
yes, you do now.
You do have
yes,
it now?
You do. It depends on what community they from.
Okay.
If they from Meehan, Wilson Lane, and Old Mill Court, they have a bus that comes through there every morning and pick them up, and they go to Hewitt School.
Well, see, that's something new that I'm not aware of. That's a change.
You mentioned Riverside earlier. I remember when my children were young, we lived in Meehan Lane. That's the only school they could go to at that time was Riverside.
Was Riverside
they would bus
school?
them to Riverside School.
Well, see, when I was going to school, up until the 4th grade, after the 4th grade, I left and went south and came back. But I went to Southside at the 8th grade, and that was integrated. There was no segregation there.
So you actually went down south for a little while?
2 years. My father went into service in 1942. I went from the 4th grade up until the 8th grade, down where I went to school at, they had 2 classes in one room up to the 7th grade. And after that, you come back I came back to New York because they didn't have any further. You had to go to another school. But you had 2 classes in each room this is in Georgia.
Oh, so that was in Georgia?
That was in Harlem, Georgia.
So did you ever see anything, or can you remember anything about how it was down there and how the people
We walked to school for a mile. The white kids their buses would carry them to their schools. They would lower the window, and you know the N-word, we heard plenty of it as the buses passed us along the highway. 1 mile we walked from where we lived in our neighborhood. Some of them lived up there on the other side, but we had to walk a mile to go to that school.
So when you came back to New York,
I came back when I was in the 8th grade to the Southside High School.
And you finished up the high school, and the junior high school and the high school.
Yes.
And then what did you do after that? You got into employment then? Did you start it with employment?
Well, I was in employment working with the soda man. Different guys that was delivering sodas to the white people up on Hempstead Avenue, up on DeMott Avenue. We had 2 soda trucks. Abby Gorinsky, Mr. Bates, they were delivering soda and beer to different places here in Rockville Center.
So what else would you like to talk about?
Well, on Nassau Street, it was an empty lot there. Mr. Bruno had a store on Banks Avenue right next to the bar, but he built the store at that empty lot for his store, and then he had people that rented apartments or rooms, not apartments, rooms behind that store that was connected. A lot of black people moved in there. They had beauty parlors. They had the Beehive, which was a bar. They called it the Sunset Inn was the proper name for it. But they called it the Beehive because the bus company was the Beeline, owned by Mr. Carter. And he started hiring black bus drivers to drive the bus.
Now, if I can recall, that was what they called the Beeline back during that time?
Beeline, owned by Mr. Carter.
Yes. And that's when at that time it was the Grapevine that was across the street. That's where
The Beehive, not the Grapevine.
Yeah, the Beehive, yeah. It
Yes.
was across the street. And that's where everybody in the neighborhood went to get something to eat and maybe to have some drinks and stuff. And I remember going in there as a young person. And we could only go to the back because that's where we bought our chicken sandwiches from Miss Julia May.
You could go in the back door and get to the restaurant, but you're not supposed to go through the bar.
Right, yeah, we couldn't go.
And there was a pool room downstairs underneath that. Next door to it, there was a soda fountain where people used to go for breakfast, connected to that bar. And then they had people living upstairs over that bar. They had apartment houses. Across the street from there, there was a name Mr. Stevenson. They had a big house right next to the railroad track. They had another house next to that one where about 8 different families lived. On the first house, it was his sisters. In the back was him and his wife and his daughter. So it was 3 houses as you go into that Beeline driveway between that and the bus drive, the train station or the train tracks. But there were 3 houses that he rented out, and he was a plumber, and he had a lot of money.
Now, if I can recall, the family you mentioned that lived in a big white house, is that the Stevenson family, or is that a different family? I remember.
In the big White House?
Yeah.
No, they had different families. Mr. Sam Martin used to shine shoes on Sunday morning, and he would bring his stand down at the steps, and people would be going to church. He would shine shoes as they go to church. He make money. He had 3 stories in that building. That was a big, big house. That was part of Willow Court. Mr. Overhopper was the owner of that property.
So tell us a little bit about the court. Of course, I know the court. I lived in the court as a young man. I think another...
You lived in Willow Court? Yes. Okay. When your grandmother then was living, Mr. Reddick and them lived on the first floor, number 1, and on the other side was building 1, but it was 2 downstairs apartments and 2 upstairs apartments for that set of steps. Then the next one was the same as it was for the first. 2 downstairs apartments, 2 upstairs apartments. But when you got through there, they had only single apartments in the back, 2 different buildings, and only 2 families in each one of those. So you got 4 and 4 is 8, and 4 is 12 families in that area. But that White House was also part of Mr. Overhopper's property. Now across the street, he owned a house, and he had parking garages that people who owned cars would park across the street in the garage.
Can you recall a little bit who was actually in that building during maybe coming along my time? Because I do remember Miss Lorraine. I remember.
Oh, I can tell you the
Lucas.
family.
Yeah.
Thomas Reddick
Yes.
and his family. Mr. Jesse Waits, not Jesse, but Jesse, I forget his last name. He was a bootlegger. He was on the other side downstairs. Upstairs was 2 ladies, Easons. They were Easons. They used to keep their dining room set fixed with plates and spoons because they said if Jesus came, they were ready to have it. That was their custom. They never changed. Next to that was Lorraine Robinson's family, his grandmother's family, the Figs. They lived there. Downstairs, the Hayneses lived downstairs underneath them. The Tommy Johnsons lived downstairs on the other side, and there was a Miss Lorraine Robinson's family lived upstairs on the right side. That's what those buildings. Now, Miss Dora and Mr. Boston, Dave Boston, and those lived in those other 2 single houses in the back there. But I can't remember all of it, but I know one time that I think Bruce Kennedy and his family moved back there.
Well, I'd like to ask you something too about what we kind of went through in life. Back during that time, we weren't really into the heroin scene.
Never, no.
But we got into it at a later date. But you remember all of the original Art Monk, Tony Lucas.
You want me to call the names out?
Yes, I'd like to.
My best friend, Billy Green, got hooked up. He had his girlfriend, they would buy a Pontiac every year. He had Pontiac. He got hooked up with some musicians. Now, you want me to call the names?
If you feel comfortable.
Because I don't want to be
Bill,
sued.
yes,
I'm calling the names if you want to. I'll
yes,
give to you.
Yes,
John Henry Peterson, they called him Hambone.
yes.
They had a man that was they called him traveling salesman. He could go to your house, ask you what you wear, come back to the store, and it would fit you. He'd steal it. Up on Sunrise Highway, they had an appliance store. The man was so hip, he took a truck up there, and they were hauling bicycles and things out of there like he had fake orders out of it. That's how good he was. He was a drug addict, Harold. Billy Green, Harold, Hambone, Bobby Colburn, let me see who else got hooked up with the drugs.
Chippy Butler.
Oh, Tibby, yeah. Tibby and I were the same age. He lived in Wellington Place, and he got hooked up on it. Me and Bob Kennard would hang out with them, but we never did drugs. Bob became an alcoholic, but he never did drugs. But they had a lot of guys that were sneaking and doing it, and then they got the women, so they were doing it, because they got him hooked up with it. But he was one of my best friends, and it hurt me. I couldn't change it. I used to hang out with them. When they went to a house, I saw 9 men use a water cup with a needle in it, and all 9 of them shot drugs with that same needle, but it wasn't sterilized. That's how you got AIDS and all that other stuff that was spreading
At a later
around.
date, yes, yeah. Now, did you mention Bobby Colburn?
Bobby Colburn, him and Hockenball, they both had jobs with the phone company, had good jobs. Had people that worked with Nassau County, had good jobs. They got hooked.
So, how was your travels when you left? Was Lakeview area anything like Rockville Center during that time?
It was busy, yes, because you know why? When you go up Lakeview Avenue, Little Brown had his liquor store, his bar on Lakeview Avenue next to that store. That was popular. Little Brownie's bar. That was the spot in Lakeview.
And I also recall, I think, I forgot the officer's name. He had the barbecue pit over there. Stevie
Hurdle?
Yeah.
He had a barbecue pit there?
Yeah, he actually had a restaurant there. He used to sell more chopped barbecue than anybody I know around.
Well, Mr. Son Crawley had a barbecue thing down off of Nassau Street, too. Yeah, Stevie did have a barbecue store, that's right. You're right. You see things like that, and you don't remember everything. But he did have it. And then they had a lot down further where they have after-hour joints to go to. People's houses, down in the basement, they had after-hour joints. Had their own bars down there. Bootleggers and gamblers. And gamblers. That's across the street from the Malvern Playground now where it is. And that house is still there.
So how do you evaluate Rockville Center from the past up until now? I mean, what do you think about it?
It was a good village. It was a good place to live, but it wasn't the best. But we didn't live as poorly as other people did. Because you did have a place to go to get jobs here in Rockville Center. People would hire you, especially the young girls, for sleep-ins. And a lot of those girls became very popular. They would let you have parties up there sometime.
Okay, so I don't know if anybody have a few more questions to ask them.
Oh, I wanted to tell you about the fact on Nassau Street, when it goes around by the bus terminal, there was a street in there called Claude Street. They had a white guy, Fats was the milkman, and I think Mr. Hilton them had a house down there, but it had a water pump down there. That was the side street, but it didn't have no pavement as you go into that street. And then where Reverend Daysnose lived off of Randall Avenue, that along the pipeline, you couldn't live on the pipeline. You couldn't have no buildings.
You mentioned earlier in your conversation about a church that's down right behind the bus company right there, and it's still there. The structure is still there. I don't know if anybody's using it. And if you go downstairs in the basement, you could almost walk all the way across to Sunrise Highway. There's a big pipe underneath the building there. What's the name of that church right there? Yeah, is it Nassau Road? That big church, like you're going down to the back parking lot, where you is the church right there?
On Nassau Street?
It used to be Ernestine's in them church before.
Well, that's what happened when St. Paul broke up. They split, and they started using that water pump place for a church.
Yes.
That's what they did. They had that for a church, and then the other part of them moved to Lakeview on Persian Boulevard. But they split. They couldn't get along with the Methodist people on their church. They let their ministers stay, because I wanted to know why they were changing up to a certain length of time, and you preach, but they didn't want you, as far as the preacher, to get too involved with individuals. So when they changed their preachers, some of the people didn't want the preacher to be changed. That's what made St. Paul split up.
We want to thank you, Elder. I mean, we've been looking forward to this for a long time. I don't know.
Can I ask him a question?
Sure. Yeah.
You know, you're doing a great job, and what a legacy. But if you have any burning desire, something that you think we missed that you want to speak on?
We needed leaders, and people like Ernestine. Now we get to the drugs. I got you to Billy Green. After they got to the drugs there, they were up here in Meehan Lane and
Yes.
with the drugs.
Yes.
Almost across the hall from where you live,
Yes.
right? They would come with their drugs, go to Lakeview and get them, and they would cheat people. They might get some drugs and sell to you, and then they sell somebody else some fake stuff, but they would make money. They had a code, and I want to know about that code. If you overdosed while you were out with them, they would leave you because they didn't want to get involved. Overdose means you've been knocked out of drugs, and they would leave you. My friend Billy Green had a car. They left him and took his car. And somebody from Lakeview that was using drugs went back and got him. Then you had Bobby Lloyd, them came in. They were doing the drugs. They got the women involved in the drugs. Next thing you know, Jimmy Davis and them came in. And you'd be surprised at the young people that got hooked up in it. And I watched one day, one of the guys got high. Tony Lucas and him were at that garbage thing over there. He put up a chair, set this guy in, took the garbage, that dumpster, and put it in front of so nobody could get to him. He went in his pocket and took his money. I said, why you do that? He said, because if we don't take it, somebody else will. And when the guy come to, we can give it back to him. But that's what they did.
Thank you, Elder Dorsey, Brother Dorsey. We've been looking forward to this for a long time. We're so glad that you got well, and your mind is outstanding. I don't care what nobody say. You got a sharp mind, and you've been my teacher for a long time. You understand? I remember when I first came to Rockville Center, you always gave me guidance. You understand? Anything that you see me going wrong on, you always spoke on it and let me know that I was heading in the wrong direction. I remember times you were so kind until you knew I was hustling back during that time, doing different work. And when you come home for lunch, you would pull your truck up on the side of the house and give me the sign to say, throw it up in there, don't worry about it, I got you. So you've been so kind to me and my family, and just keep going on. Thank you so much.
All right. Before you were born, Eleanor and your father were courting. I was a young boy. My sister used to hang out with them down on Center Avenue, which was across the street where Shiloh is now. We go to the bootlegger, they get a fifth of liquor with the little seal on it, and they bring it back, and they would have their partying on Sundays. The number writers were so busy in Rockville Center. Everybody you knew was writing a number. They would come to your house in the morning before you went to work so you could play your numbers. And the number writers got so busy, they started putting detectives out here. That's how the young man from Lakeview, the black guy, they put him out here because he could get close to black people. What's his name now?
Oh, you're talking about, I know exactly who you're talking about.
Was it not Jones? What's his name?
No, Mr. Jones was a police
Oh,
officer,
yeah, I
but,
was a
but
policeman.
he wasn't into that.
No, he wasn't into
But
that.
there was another, he became a detective, and
Yes.
he retired from the police department as a detective.
That's right, because they had him checking out Herman in different places. They would come in and check these people out, and they mingle, because a lot of times people didn't know who they were. But that's how they found out what was going on with the drugs.
Floor is open now to anyone who wants to ask Mr. Dorsey questions.
Yes,
They're free to do so.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Dorsey about the urban renewal and how they came from houses to apartment buildings, how that came about.
Well, you see, they had Mr. Zeddy Brown with the NAACP, and they were helping to get homes for black people. He owned the home. A lot of people, he wanted his house, big house up on Wellington Place. It was too big to move. He couldn't move it, but he was renting it out, and he wound up moving to Hempstead. But a lot of white people came and helped the black people. That's how they got the projects. What's the young man that...
Mr. Gold.
No, yeah, Mr. Gold was good. Bobby, then, what was the fellow that he was the family with that died?
Say that again.
Bobby Lloyd.
Oh, Bobby,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, this girl.
Yes, his wife.
What's her name?
Diane.
Jimmy Jack.
Jimmy Jack's
Jack
mother.
family.
She
Yeah.
took a lot of interest in helping the black people.
Yes.
That's how they did a lot of things, because when we got the projects, They wanted to put a fence around the whole project.
Heard that, yes.
Wow.
Yes, yes.
And she stopped them from doing that.
And also, I want to just add that they didn't want to put the right amount of apartments here. They was short on the apartments when they built them. And so, of course, they really didn't want to build apartments, but they forced them. And of course, the white people got together and they went to the churches and demanded that the mayor do the right thing.
All right, now can I tell you something about the apartments? They were cheap. I had a 3-bedroom apartment. I was paying like $100 and some odd for that a month. I had just started working with the village. That was back in 1967 when I moved in at 24B Old Mill Court. My wife and I were the president and of the housing authority of our little get-together. And we had people that passed away. We would go around and take up a private collection for their family. And we knew everybody. We knew everybody in the neighborhood. There were really no strangers. Everybody got along. Nowadays, you don't know who's on your porch. You don't know your neighbors. Some of them don't even speak to each other. But we knew everybody in our neighborhood.
But you and your wife was a great team. God bless her. Y'all was a great team.
Well, we had to be because that's the way we were raised, and we had to help one another. People don't do that now. They don't cooperate like that now. But we had to help one another. And you had a lot of black people who were helping. You had a lot of black people. But they had influence, and we needed somebody because a lot of people didn't want to do it, but they left it to somebody else to do.
We lost a sense of community.
Yeah?
We lost the sense of community.
Yes, we did. That's exactly what it is.
Love as well.
That's exactly what it was, yes. Yes.
And a lot of people moved when the urban renewal came here and they made the apartments and the projects. A lot of people moved out of Rockville Center and elsewhere because there wasn't enough space or apartments.
A lot of people did. Yes, they did move out.
Baker, Lakeview.
Now, when I tell you I moved into my apartment, I had a 3-bedroom apartment. I started working with the village the same time, about 1967. I retired in 1991. But we moved where that nursing home is now. They had houses up there that they had put people into temporarily until they could get the apartments finished. And then Mr. Gold had separated Old Mill Court from where Meehan Lane.
Okay.
But he helped a lot of people.
But Meehan Lane came in like 5 years later.
No, same time. Same time. It was just a difference of maybe a month or so when people started moving in, because they were built at the same time. And Mr. Gold was a big help to a lot of black people.
Was this built at the time? This building, the corner store, the bar, was this here when the project was built, or this came later?
No, the bar came later because I think there was a barber shop here and a store, but that came later because it was closer to the neighborhood. That's why it came later. Yeah, but let me tell you something. People think we were prejudiced, white people were prejudiced. Everybody wasn't prejudiced. There were just some people that you didn't get along with. And you got black people who are prejudiced. And if you got more than I have, some people thought they were better off. And that's what happened in this neighborhood. They had people that thought they were better than other people.
Especially if you're light-skinned.
Yes. Yes. You better believe it. You better believe it. If you were light-skinned, you got over. You got over.
I heard this from one of my nephews who was light-skinned. And he had a friend of his who was dark-skinned. And they was working in Baldwin. So the boss was white. So he always said to my nephew who was light-skinned, he said, I'd rather you do it than that dark-skinned guy, than that darkie. He says, he just told him, he appreciated him being light-skinned. And the dark-skinned guy, he really didn't appreciate.
Well, one thing we didn't go to when I was telling you about the people that were doing this paper, they had people up on Hempstead Avenue where ladies had worked as sleep-in girls or just go in daily work. and they had, I don't know who wrote the paper or who started it, but they had a big thing about 5 or 6 different quotes from different people, how they respected or what they thought of us as being black down here on the West End. That's what they call it. And it wasn't too favorable with a lot of white people.
I know that's.
Also, let me comment too. You know, a lot of us, in my experience, being very so-called light-skinned, a lot of light-skinned black people in America, we're not privileged as much as we are shown leniency and tolerated more amongst Caucasian people.
True.
That is true.
True.
It's class. Colorism.
We had a family lived here. I don't know whether y'all know the Reeds.
The reason from
Gene Reed, they lived on Banks Avenue. He was one of the first black men that tried to get into the fire department. And because he was black, they didn't want him. They wouldn't accept
he's from
him.
Lakeview.
He was,
Mr. Reed, light skinned. He lived.
yeah, but he lived in Rockville Center at first. He moved to Lakeview, but he was right here on Banks Avenue. His family was raised. Eunice, Edith Reed, all those people were raised right here in Rockville Center. And they didn't want no black men on that fire department.
If we had to give advice on how to get the sense of community back in Rockville Center, what would be one of the things you would say to get this community back the way it used to be?
Now, that would take a lot of cooperation from different people. Because I could give you a thought, you can give me a thought, but we'd have to get together. I'm not that smart that we could do it, because we were working at it at one time, but it just didn't come out the way we wanted it.
I just want to say, that's a great thought you made, but the point is having meetings and everybody be honest.
Yes.
You see, you need honesty, and the people to be strong and be dedicated. It must be dedicated. It can come together. You'd be surprised.
But not only that, regardless of how you felt, if you were honest and spoke on how you felt, then other people could understand you.
Yeah.
I don't understand you, you may not understand me. Yeah. Everybody has to give their opinion, and some of it might be better than what we have.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
See, sometimes people don't want to change. They want things their way,
Yes,
and it can't be that way all
And
the
they think
time.
because they had a little more dollars in their pocket.
Not only that, they got a little more influence. No, $100. Yeah,
There you go. The right word, influence.
influence. That's what it's all about.
Oh, we should work on that. We should work on that.
It's good though.
We should definitely work
It's
on
good.
that. Yes. It's a beautiful thing, but we have to come together as a people. We have to learn to live together and be right for each other. Because then, I mean, unless it looks like we're going to be doomed already. But we can stop it. If we be serious enough, we can do it.
You know what's wrong with a lot of black people? They don't want to be told what to do. And some of us need to be told because we don't know what route to take.
Gotcha.
We don't know what route to take. You understand that? We can't all take the same route.
Right, there you go.
When I was a young boy
I like that.
in this neighborhood, we had a whole lot of hell raising. I watched the drug addicts, I watched the alcoholics, and I didn't get involved in any of it.
What a blessing. What a blessing.
That God had blessed me, but I didn't know all that. I didn't know all of that. God had blessed me. The guys that I grew up with are not here.
That's right.
Bobby Hockenball, Billy Green, Hambone. Hambone them had a lot of musicians. They would go with the musicians, and they would get drugs and they bring it back here because he was a musician.
Okay.
He'd go down to Broadway and play with them at the big places. That's how good a musician he was. He
Broadway
played.
in Manhattan?
Yes,
Wow. Wow.
yes. They had a club there where they would start serving chicken on the half chicken or something in New York City. What was that? The blues place down there in New York City.
You mean where they play jazz?
Yes, yes,
I know the name of the place. I just can't.
yeah. But that wasn't my style of music. I went up to see Ruth Brown. Ruth Brown.
Brown, okay.
Yeah, but
That up.
That's just way back in. You gotta look it
I'm
up.
about to Google that.
Yeah, what did she sing? Just.
but where she sang at, they didn't serve alcohol.
Okay.
Where she's saying at, right up on Broadway, you got 42nd Street.
Yeah.
42nd Street.
It was called the House of Jazz back then.
Yes, they had it. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
But you see, one thing about people, you have to love one another.
Hey.
I don't care. I live in an apartment house now. We got 8 different tenants on the first floor, and you got 8 on the second floor. I had a lady lived across the hall from me, 96 years old. And you couldn't ask for a better friend, and she was white. I saw her one day, we had a snow about 2-3 years ago. She was shoveling snow from the back of her car.
Wow.
I say, Phyllis, you too old for that. She says, I've been doing it all of my life. She'd just go to the store. If she brought some bagels or whatever, she would knock on my door and offer me some. What's them little hot dog things you get together with the dough around? What do you call that?
Oh, God, what you call them? Yeah. Pig in the blanket.
Pig in the blanket. She would bring me some. But they were very friendly and very nice.
That's Ruth Brown.
Wow.
That's one of them songs, right?
And you know who else lives around here? Maxine Brown.
Yes.
She lived down in Sunken City.
Yes, he did.
And she came and spent a whole Christmas day with me and Marilyn Denson and some of the girls from my choir. That's how nice she was. And I used to socialize with her and take her over to New York where she did some practicing. I forget the name of the brothers that had a bar over there in a club.
Out that way?
In New York City. And they used to come to the Celebrity Club and play all the time in Freeport. That was the big place where we went.
I heard about the Celebrity Club. Yeah.
They used to call it the Cotton Inn. And you know what they had for the walls when they first opened up? You know the aluminum foil that you have? They had aluminum foil around the wall. Yeah.
Okay.
They had aluminum foil around the wall. That was their Then they changed it up and called it Celebrity Club, and they made it fancy.
Okay.
But that was one of the first places to go for black people to socialize in, and a place in Hempstead on Peninsula. They would have dances, and Dinah Washington and Ruth Brown and them would be over there, right where the gas station is.
Club?
Huh?
The Polish Club?
Polish Hall.
Polish Hall.
Not the Polish Hall. This is right there at Peninsula in Marshall. Right on the other side of Mercy Hospital.
Okay.
You're talking about Gladys, it's the old
Before you get to Gladys Den. Gladys Den wasn't even made up then.
Okay.
But they used to have boxing over there. They also had dances and things over there. It was a big place there, where that gas station is now. And then they had, because they had a bowling place where that moving thing is, that storage place.
With the storage.
Yeah, where the storage was, that was a bowling place there. Yeah.
When did you feel come into play? Because I remember my grandmother saying they used to go to the army base, you feel, and they used to party up there.
Reverend Days had the young ladies going out there. You see a lot of ladies here, they wind up marrying Air Force guys.
My grandmother met, I believe, my grandfather from Freeport, Ben Graves there.
A lot of them.
Yeah.
A lot of them. The Reverend Days are encouraging young ladies to go out there.
I think it was the army, maybe.
It was Air Force.
Yeah.
Now, the Air Force that they had out there, when they built those houses, you see up on Lakeview Avenue, up on the other side of Long Beach Road, the same man built those houses that was building for the Air Force, but black people couldn't move in up there. North, that was east of Lakeview Avenue, up Long Beach Road.
Oh, okay.
To this day, I don't think too many blacks live.
Well, they weren't allowed to. They weren't allowed to.
To this day.
The first doctor that I know that was black was up on Hempstead and something. I forget his name. He was the first black doctor.
Doctor.
Was it Brown? What was his name?
I went to school with his daughter. Doctor.
It's up past Hewlett School.
Yeah.
On the left-hand side.
Left-hand side on the corner.
That's right, on the corner. That was the first black doctor that they allowed to move up there on Hempstead Avenue.
As you get to going on Lakeview Avenue, as you're going towards Hempstead Avenue, on the right-hand side, it's a beautiful house up there. I mean, all brick. I mean, like a two-car garage, beautiful.
Where's this at now?
On Lakeview Avenue,
Yeah.
Before you get to Hempstead Avenue, on the right-hand side, before that corner is a big, beautiful.
You got some black people that live in there?
Yeah, the black
That's between Village Avenue and the Hempstead Avenue you talk about now. Lakeview Avenue.
You're on Lake Avenue.
On Lakeview Avenue.
Yeah, they put the house there about. I remember they were
About 10, 15
changing.
years ago.
Yeah.
Big house.
Heard the black people living in there.
Yeah.
Beautiful house.
Brother Sherman lived near there. Hempstead. Big H brother.
Yeah.
brother
Sherman.
No, that's
couple
that's
houses
after
down.
Sherman. That's
Yeah.
after Sherman.
Right.
The guy needs contracting. He barely lived in the house. The little
Okay.
son did. He
Oh,
built the house there. It looked like it belonged somewhere in Garden City. Actually, too big for the
beautiful.
projects.
Yeah, it's
Private
gorgeous.
property.
Well, see up here on Village Avenue, not Village, but Lakeview Avenue,
Yeah.
they had a divide there. And the guys that lived there, they owned the drugstore up on Sunrise Highway.
Okay.
And they had a divide. At that time, a lot of white people were into the pigeon racing. They raised the pigeons. That's why you got so many of them. They would train homing pigeons. They would take them out to Jersey and different places and see which one won the race coming back home. That's what they did. That was their pleasure.
Yeah, what? Racing pigeons. I heard that. Sure. They do that a lot.
They had pigeons. Guys, Alvin Repetto and them, they lived on the other side of Merrick Road. They had pigeons. Sam Walters and them had pigeons down there on Main Avenue. And they had pigeons. I forget Charlie's name, but they had a drugstore on the corner of Sunrise and Park Avenue. Then they moved across the street because I used to work in there, do cleaning in the drugstore. But they had that. But they had a whole lot of pigeon races.
Mike Tyson
It
used to.
sounds something like the name Carucci or something like that. I remember they used to live there because I used to go just try to look to see the pigeons all the time.
Right.
Cancellery or one of some kind of drugstore like that.
Yeah. But you know, they had a drugstore. It was not only a drugstore, it was a counter where you could soda fountain and everything else there. On the same side that they got I think a luncheonette there now. On the northeast side of Sunrise Highway, they got the drugstore. I think Verizon is across the street from them. But they moved from one side to the other. But they had both places they had for a drugstore. But they were brothers, Charlie, I forget the other one's name. But it was a big place there. Black people had a place to go to. All they had to do was take care of it. They had a bar down there. Somebody said it was set on fire because they didn't want the black people down there. The Grapevine.
Oh yeah, Grapevine.
They said the Grapevine was set on fire.
Brownie's Grapevine, wasn't it?
No, Brownie's bar.
That was Bob. That was Bob. Bob Wilkins.
Bob Wilkerson.
Yes.
Bob Wilkerson, the Grapevine. And after the Grapevine was burned, they had the hutch up here.
Okay. Yeah.
The Grapevine got a little bit too fly for
Yes.
They didn't want. I think they didn't want it in that area either.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
And they wanted to build. See,
And not only that, they did build. After they burned it down, they did build.
And you notice they continue to build just to keep black from buying stuff. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, but even if they had Avalon own this place, if this was our area and they didn't want us out of it, then they should have made prices that we could afford. But they didn't do that.
That's right. That's right.
They didn't do that.
Put it out of reach.
They put it out of reach. Then when they had people in the senior citizens, if they were making more money, they gave them more money to move out of the senior citizens.
Ain't that so?
Yeah.
Ain't that so?
Yeah, Ernestine and all those people were offered money to move out of that senior citizen area if they made more money than they called for.
You know, you didn't mention, and we were talking about some of the different communities. Son Crawley's place over there, because I remember I used to sneak up in the yard. That's where everybody used to go, especially in the warm weather.
Yeah, but
Do the gambling and stuff. And
on Banks Avenue and
the top of the year.
on Banks Avenue and I'm trying to think Nassau Avenue.
Yeah.
But Son Crawley's was down in back of Second Baptist Church next to the Coca-Cola plant. That's where he first had his junkyard and his restaurant. And then he bought that area and it became very popular for a hangout.
It was a black area, Uncle Fawn? It was
Yeah,
black?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, right on the corner of Banks Avenue and Nassau Avenue. and where Banks Avenue ended.
And he had a junkyard and something.
That was back on the other side of Coca-Cola plant.
Yeah, I'm in a Coca-Cola plant.
Oh, he had a
You could go into the Coca-Cola plant and watch them how they bottle the Cokes and everything. But what they would do, they had a big yard where they parked their trucks when they put their Coca-Cola crates on there for delivery. We didn't know any better, or we knew better. We'd go over the fence and steal Coca-Colas off the trucks.
Everybody had a Coke.
Okay, now listen to this very carefully. The guys that were stealing off of the trucks were putting their bottles of Coke down in the cold water at the end of where I told you that dish ran.
Okay.
And other guys were going down there stealing from them. That was it. Yeah. But that's what they parked their trucks in there and load them up for the delivery. Yeah. And Mr. Henry Gerald, they had an old bus. He made a restaurant out of it.
Oh.
Call it Henry's Diner.
Oh, out of the bus.
Out of the bus. They had them buses like, you put your luggage over.
Okay.
With the long noses. They stopped. When they stopped making them, they sold them. That's how people made restaurants out of them. Then they got the snub-nosed buses like they got now.
Learn something.
We all learned a lot. We gotta do this more often or something.
Well, you know what? You guys got to make sure you remember and teach your family how to do better. That's all you do. You teach them how to. I laugh. I say, now here's my grandson teaching over here at the grade school. But no, they told me. He said, Grandpa, the black kids give you disrespect more than any others, just because you're black.
Our society.
And you're a teacher, but they don't respect you. And let me tell you something else. We have to teach our children how to respect their parents. Because if you don't respect your parents, you don't respect anybody. I don't care what color you are.
That's why I think we need to have some type of meetings every now and then.
We need leadership.
Yes.
More men. And that's what you guys are supposed to be doing.
Yes.
More men. We need leadership. Right. Don't leave it to the women. Because Ernestine was really a good person. But you got to do it together.
Yes.
See, too many guys, they want to be important, but they don't want to work.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, they want to be seen, they want to be known, but they don't want to work. And it takes a little extra time to do things like that. And you'll wind up with a better place. Now you see that place they did with Martin Luther King Center? That was a nursing home when they first started. On this end.
So it was a nursing home?
You didn't know that?
No.
It was like a little nursing home right on this side of on this end.
You used to go by there. It's been there for a while.
Daycare center. Boy, that's what they call it. That's what they call it.
Daycare.
It was a daycare. Yeah. It was a daycare center. Yeah, daycare center.
Yep.
What he was saying earlier about how we can get our communities back together it's becoming harder and harder unless we can be taken up from where we are right now and put in another area where we got more space, where we can begin to learn how to grow crops. What I'm saying,
our meeting this week,
this community was great when everybody's family knew each other.
Yes.
years ago.
So whenever there was a problem, like you said earlier, somebody could correct the situation. You didn't need no special permission to do it. You understand? And if you came and you told somebody's parents that they were doing something wrong, you might get two whippings. You understand? Based on who the person is. Now everybody didn't trust elders to give their child a spanking, but if they knew you was an upright person, they would allow that to happen.
Now let me give you another example. Black people, a lot of them come from the South. Like I told you up on Wellington Place, they had gardens that they grew their own stuff. A lot of them had big yards, they had gardens. You had the Italian people, they had grape harvests. over their driveway in their backyard. You know why, don't you? They made wine. And you could go in the basement. When Millie's store, the first time I ever ate Italian food, when the twins took me to the kitchen to eat with them, their father had in their basement about 5 or 6 barrels along the wall, big barrels, all full of wine. Made their own wine. On Sundays they played what you call bocce ball.
Staying true to their roots and their culture.
Yes, yes.
So we don't have that anymore because we're splintered too much by different cultures of people, and everybody's struggling to have some control over their way of life. So it's just everybody starts to get further and further apart.
Now let me give you a good example of that. You got a lot of people that were born in this country. Then you got a lot of people that came from other countries and they didn't get along with each other. You got a lot of people that didn't get along with each other. A lot of people, West Indians, because they didn't want to be called Negroes. They thought they were better than we were. And they acted in that manner. They thought that we were better than just a regular Negro because we took a lot of stuff. But you got a lot of them that came here and they would go buy property in places that you and I wouldn't think of buying.
That's right. That's right.
As long as they had the money. You see, we learned to be, what do you say, in our place, what do you call that? When they make you stay in one spot, you in your spot?
Okay.
Put you in your place.
Huh?
Put you in your place.
Yes, yes. And a lot of people didn't go out of that realm. They didn't want to go out of that realm because they didn't know how.
South, we built the country. We were so industrial. We built towns, cities, all across the country, hundreds of them. They ran us out. Then that's why we came. Well, some of us was a slave on Long Island. Long Island had slavery.
That's true.
But we came here mainly like in the 40s and stuff, and we were prosperous because we were family. We had something in common.
Now let me give you a good example of what you were saying.
Houses together.
I'll give you a good example of what you just said. They were bringing people up here from the South on tractor trailers, taking them out. Suffolk County, potato places over there. They had them little sheds over there living. That's how they got a lot of people up here. You can see the tractor trailers hauling them.
Wow.
From the South.
From the South, out there on Suffolk County at the potato farms, garden. That's how they got work out there.
Those are grapevines now. They're wineries now.
Yeah, I guess it is wineries now.
Yeah.
And plus the lady that had the hiring of young ladies, they were bringing young ladies up here for sleeping girls. Miss Atkins helped them find rooms to live in until they could get a job. And they didn't like Miss Atkins because they said she was involved. But she was helping people. Because them young girls coming up here looking for sleeping jobs.
That's the way they was leaving the South.
She would take care of them and make sure they ate straight and nothing happened to them.
Well, she would try to find them a place to stay. She was helping. You see, sometimes when you do things like that, people don't like you because you're doing something that they think is wrong. But you're helping somebody.
Misinterpret, yeah.
But everybody wants to have a say-so no matter what, even if it's not their business. Some people always want to go to the left instead of going to the right. It's always one or two, no matter what.
Well, you know, that's why when you call yourself men, you have to stand for it and don't let anybody run over you.
That's right.
You don't have to be nasty, but don't let anybody run over you. I never will forget when I was down south, my grandfather and them, I guess I was 12 years old. My father had a 36 Buick, big Buick. And they came up here and got it and drove it back down south. If you had a flat tire, you couldn't get nothing but a punch in there because they wasn't giving out no patches and all that kind of stuff. They were saving that rubber for Air Force people. Young ladies that wore silk dresses and silk pants, they wasn't selling silk no more. They were making parachutes out of them. So when the women start getting, what do you call it, rayon?
Yeah.
Rayon, they start wearing that kind of stuff.
Yes, pantyhose.
Yes.
Yeah.
All of that come from not knowing how to take care of yourself too. You got to know what you're doing. My grandfather and them came up here and got that car. I was driving a car down in Georgia at the age of 12. No license, you didn't need it, and no insurance. Didn't need it. Miss Atkins, the lady I was saying about Miss Fanny Atkins, my father was drinking one Sunday. I'm in his car, convertible, big green Buick, got with the shift, thick shift. He's got me driving the car, and I almost ran over Miss Atkins because she was crossing the street to go to church.
Wow.
When I went to get my junior license, Miss Atkins was the only lady that took my mother in and gave her a place after we couldn't find no place. Because if you had a child, people didn't want you, wouldn't take you in. And we lived at 27 North Center Avenue. That's up where the gas station is, right on the left-hand side now.
Okay.
Grab House used to have a place there for feed in the back of Miss Atkins. They had a monkey they used to have in the front window on Sunrise Highway. You go, people stand and look at the monkey. But he had a storage yard for like hay or whatever they needed. And Miss Atkins had lived at 27 North Center Avenue. I lived at 54 where the firehouse is now. So we moved from 54 to 27. Then from 27 to 40, I lived in 3 different houses on Center Avenue. 3 different houses. But when Miss Atkins helped people, she did it to help them. You can't just go around and tell people what to do. You help them. I can't make you do what I want you to do. You're a grown man. I have no business trying to, I can't convert you to nothing. All I can do is give you advice. And I tell people now, I know I was living in Sodom and Gomorrah. And God took me out of it. And when he took me out of it, and I got dehydrated and lost my mind. Even though I lost my mind, he brought me through that. Not only did he bring me through it, he bring me to the age of 92 years old. And I don't have no problems. I don't complain about nothing.
That's a blessing. What a blessing.
I don't complain about one thing. 92 years old. My friends didn't even make it in the 80s, some of them, you know. Didn't make 80, but I thank God for it. And that's another thing people don't believe in. I don't care what church you go to. The Bible tells you, if you don't read the Bible, you don't read it. Unless you confess your sins to Jesus Christ, he's the mediator between you and God, between me and God. You can't go to God first. You have to go through Jesus Christ. That's why they hung him on the cross. And his blood was shed, so he died for our sins, and we weren't even born. We weren't even born. So now, when you get to the point of where you need help and you go to God, you go through Jesus Christ. I don't have a problem with it. I never in my life had a bank account until my wife died. I took out insurance for me and her, and I had paid so doggone much insurance, they wouldn't allow me but $6,000. And I had paid over that. I said, let me get out of this. Because I was going to the Army hospital and they wouldn't let me have no more. Her insurance was $25,000. Mine was $6,000. When she died, at $8,000, we buried her. The $17,000 I put in the bank. That was the first time I ever had a bank account. First time in my life, I try to make sure that my daughters and my sons have bank accounts. Start your children, teach them how to save. And you learn how to save. Just because you got money, you don't have to spend it. You need it. Need it for whatever you need, you spend it. You know, I used to be at the bartender. You and, what's with it?
Right.
Come in bar. Set him up. Bar so-and-so. Set him up. They want to be big shots. These number writers and big people, right? Set him up. They're showing off because they want to be noticed. They want attention. And all they want to do is get some of them girls out so they can do something with them.
That's right.
You're trying to impress somebody. That's why you have to be very careful. See, I was out there too. Now I got daughters. I damn sure don't want nobody trying to mess with them. And I don't want nobody to take advantage of them. And when you get daughters, you don't want nobody to take advantage of yours.
That's right.
So you have to learn to give them respect. You learn to give them respect. And you definitely don't want nobody to misuse your daughter. Teach boys how to stand up for themselves. But they had, like I tell about his grandmother and them, and some Eastons, they fight like men, and nobody mess with them.
Right.
Didn't nobody, that's right, they didn't mess with them. They were strong women.
Every time I came to Rockville Center, one of the older guys would always tell me, your aunt's something else.
Yeah, because they see them guys, you know how you get devilish? Yeah. James Henry used to tell me how when he sat behind his wife in school, he used to pull her hair and tease her. His mother, her mother didn't like him because of his brother. They had 3 women that used to tell her when him and her daughter met on the corner, they would go back and tell her. That's how the neighborhood was. Nosy, but they knew what was going on. But they wound up getting married anyway. Wind up getting married. So sometimes we learn, it may take over a little time, but we get wisdom. Don't rush it, but don't let nobody use you, and don't let nobody misuse you. You walking all right?
Yeah, I'm good.
I see you kind of hopping. I didn't know Chauncey had had a stroke.
Ooh.
Chauncey?
Chauncey?
In Hempstead?
They didn't tell you?
No, Chauncey, no.
Next door. He worked at the center.
Lately?
Huh?
2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago. He's still home.
Let me call around, man.
And I asked Patrick about it.
Said a word about it.
I told Patrick, I said, nobody said nothing.
Is Chauncey living out here in Rock Center? Is he living out here with
Living in
Lois?
Lakeview.
He lives, wherever he lives, he's home.
With Lakeview, with Lois.
Yeah, with Lois. He's home. But he had a stroke. Well, I enjoyed talking to you guys.